Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Daniel Moss. I'm a co-director of the Agroecology Fund, and I want to welcome you to a session today at the Oxford Conference on Defending Indigenous Territories and Food Systems. I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. So you've joined a session in which we'll explore how Indigenous peoples are organizing to defend their territories and Indigenous food systems. Indigenous food systems are the foundation of agroecology, and yet they are very much under threat by mining and other extractive industries, land grabbing, and homogenization and dispossession driven by an industrial food system. Indigenous food systems safeguard agrobiodiversity, which is essential for ecosystems and human communities alike. What are Indigenous peoples' strategies to preserve and strengthen their food systems to fight food insecurity and climate change? How do Indigenous peoples build alliances with other allies in a global movement for agroecology? So we're here to join with Indigenous leaders from around the world for a dynamic discussion. And I want to turn this over to our speakers. We're joined today by speakers from in Indigenous territories in North America, as well in Southeast Asia. And I think we're having this conversation at a really critical time for Indigenous food systems, where finally they're being recognized as the basis of the kind of food systems towards which we need to transition. And the role of Indigenous peoples in safeguarding biodiversity and agrobiodiversity and building climate resilience is really being highlighted in conversations such as at the Conference of Party conventions, which we've seen this year, at the end of 2022, in both Egypt around climate change and in Montreal around biodiversity. And some of our speakers have been present and active in those conversations. So I think we have a really terrific panel to illuminate what is going on in Indigenous territories, as well as what is going on at the global level with respect to safeguarding Indigenous food systems and really lifting them up as the basis of the kind of food systems that we need urgently in this time of so much planetary crisis and human rights violations. So let me just introduce the panel, if I may, or introduce the first speaker, which would be the first speaker we're going to hear from our colleague in Southeast Asia, actually dialing in this morning or this evening for him, actually quite late, from Thailand. His name is Hsar Dodo Mutu, and he's been working as the Environmental Education Program Coordinator for the Karen Environmental and Social Action Network since March 2013. For this position, he researches and develops education materials and syllabi, conducts outreach trainings for secondary and post-secondary schools, and facilitates the integration of environmental studies in the core academic curriculum of Karen education system. He completed his undergraduate studies at the Asia Pacific International University in 2008 with a BA in Education and Psychology, and then finished up in Counseling Psychology at Assumption University in Bangkok in 2013. Hsar is passionate about providing opportunities for Indigenous youth and exploring innovative ways to inspire youth to carry on Indigenous values and concepts. So we're thrilled today to be able to hear from Hsar, to share his experiences with us. So please go ahead, Hsar, unmute yourself and show your video, and please dive into your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, and then and also Clay is a greeting from our current tradition, saying that they'll be in good health and well-being. And today I'll be speaking on behalf of my organization called the Korean Environmental Social Action Network. It is an indigenous Korean organization based in Burma, and then we have been working with the indigenous community for many, many decades. And today, I'll be speaking on behalf of my organization, and then I would like to thank, the organizers and also especially our friends at the Agroecology Fund for inviting us to join this conference. I think this is very important conference that we exchange our views and learn from each other about how we're going to build a better future. And first of all, I'd like to convey my sincere and heartfelt condolences to the families of Chris and friends for after learning about his passing. And then I feel really sorry. And then I believe that Chris was one of the great warriors for our indigenous communities around the world for his role in defending indigenous territories and food system. And now I like to share my PowerPoint here that I prepare. Yeah, today I will be speaking about and share a story about the Stonefish Park. It is a very unique, indigenous territory located in Burma, so East Burma, and then we are very proud to have this park established, and then collectively we try to protect and defend this indigenous territory. Before we share a story about the Stonefish Park, the indigenous territory, I'd like to briefly touch on the issue about Burma and then Korean people, because I'm a Korean ethnic or indigenous people. Burma is a country rich in natural resources, and then it is a ethnically and culturally diverse country. And Korean people is one of the main ethnicity or ethnic nationality which we recognize, and then identify ourselves as indigenous people. We have around 8 to 10 million people, and then as some of you already know, Burma is a very beautiful, but we have experienced a series of political instability and over some decades of the armed conflict, so it is in the bad shape. And apart from that, the government of Burma tried to dominate and then centralize, and then in every aspect, through policy, they have their discriminatory policy against the indigenous people. They try to grab and then plunder our natural resources. These are all the experience that we have for many decades. And then on top of that, climate change is one of the big issue that we are facing today. So this is very quick, overview of the Burma and then where it is located, as you can see here, and which indigenous people that I'm from. So these man-made disaster and plus the natural disaster are real threat to our people and to our food system and also to our territory, livelihood, and then also cultural preservation. To mitigate this threat and overcome these problems, that's why the Stonefish Park was established. It is a bottom-up approach. It is indigenous territory, and it is people center. We use this kind of approach to establish this. And our vision of the Stonefish Park is to have a genuine peace, and then cultural resilience, and to have a sustainable natural resource management in our territory, and to have a sustainable livelihood. Try to preserve these resources and our food system for the next generation to come. This is very important. As you can see here, we at the park, in the yellow, the left side of here, we have a total of 1.6 million acres, the indigenous territory. And within the territory, you have a different color here. The yellow one represent the Gaw, which is customary land, and then the blue one represent the wildlife sanctuary. We also have the dark green is the reserve forest, and the light green is the community forest. So we try to manage this that indigenous territory in the integrated land use approach management, so that we share a responsibility to protect all these this heritage or these natural resources by the indigenous people, our people. As you can see here, our vision and our goals, we have 3 goals here. The first one is peace and self-determination, and the second one is environment integrity, and then the last one is cultural revitalization. And in the Stonefish Park, we have over 400 villages, and with a population of over 100,000 people. So it is a big landscape, and it is it's a big landscape that we try to protect and defend. These are our ancestral territories. Yeah, the Stonefish Park, is very unique territory, and then it is built on the the constitution of the charter, because the charter is very the backbone of the function of the Solomon Peace Park. And yeah, this charter is very important because it's bring all people, you know, like people from different sectors. For instance, like the Korean National Union, the federal government of Burma, and then community-based organization, and also the local indigenous communities, you know, together to work together to build this build and protect this national this not national but this territory. It is very unique, and then, you know, the drafting development of this charter is based on resulted from a series of consultation with the community, with the sorry. Yeah, with a ratification of the Solomon Peace Park charter is based, you know, resulted from series of consultation with the community inputs and consents. And yeah, if we look at this one, this is the governance structure of the Solomon Peace Park. It is governed and administered by its General Assembly. We have a General Assembly representing the Korean National Union, the federal government of Korean people, and community-based organization, and most importantly, the local people community. It is a very good and very practical example of the federal governance system which Burma is aimed for in the future. In our community, you know, in our current community, our food and our traditional knowledge are very closely related because it is rooted in our ancestral teaching of to have a harmonious living between the human and nature. It is based on the interdependence principle of helping and caring for each other. In Korean, we call them Adomaga, and we are fully aware that we're able to survive and then survive due to the well-being of the biodiversity and then the environment. So we believe that healthy environment leads to sustainable livelihood and food system. So this is, you know, approach is based on very holistic, not very like a one section, but it's cover every aspect of the system. Yeah. And here I like to share with you a little bit about Gore, because Gore, as I explained to you, it is our customary land. It is very important because it is the heart, you know, is the backbone of the food system. And here we can see there are three common elements. They're very important. They have to be interdependent. They have to be interrelated. The first one, community, and then the second one is the governance. And then the last one is the territory of natural resources. They add like a lechor in Korean, we call lechor. It is the three-stone cooking stove. You know, everything has to be connected. Because you know to function sustainably, you know, these three need to be connected, cohesive, and then, you know, supportive to each other. It's very important. And then today, things defending our indigenous food system and territory. I like to stress that our indigenous food is our cultural identity, because the system which is based on sustaining the environment and maintaining biological diversity and ecosystem. So to share with you about our strategy, I pick up one practical example that we've been doing, and then, you know, like maintaining for many generation. It is a rice ban. Rice ban is not a new idea or new concept, because the activity or the practice has been you know, sustained by generationally. It is where community set up their own committee, you know, they work together, they write their own rules and regulations, and then they come up with the activities, and then, you know, like they put the rice, especially the extra rice, or, you know, after the harvest time. So they build this network. It is very important that they work together, and then they maintain or sustain or preserve their native. This is very important. The aim of you know, the aim of the rice ban is the applying and strengthening indigenous knowledge and practice, which is also critical for climate change mitigation. And as the aim of the rice ban, you know, is in our community is to for food security and sustainable livelihood, community mobilization and cohesion, and also try to empower youth and women to take a leading role in the community activity and work, and upholding community values of Damada Makat, the one that I explained to you about mutual respect and mutual dependency, and then the philosophical principles that are based on the of living or surviving together. And then most importantly, during this time of crisis of the natural disaster, it is a strategy to mitigate climate change disaster. And currently in the Southern Peace Park, we have 95 rice bands so far. And I believe that there'll be more in the future because community are very motivated, inspired, and also they're very engaged and active in, set up this rice band, within their own community, because they see and they see the value or the positive outcome after, we're working very closely with community. But in the face of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss that have a serious impact on our food system, I believe that it's important that we indigenous community and local community are very active, and then they are very they play a very important role to sustain our shared planet ecosystem. And it is also important that we need to we have to acknowledge how the important role that indigenous community play in sustaining, protecting this world, the environment, and then offer hope and then different path for future. So this is very we have responsibility, and also we have to collectively protect and promote the indigenous rights at the local level, at the international level, and also in Burma and across the world, and then learn from their experience. And I also think that Southern Peace Party is a very good example that can play a role, and also bring positive impact to the local community and the world. Because after setting up the Southern Peace Park, we have seen a kind of ripple effects on the other territories within Burma. We have Tati Dao indigenous part in the Dao district of Burma, Boklo in the southern area, and now Karenni is another indigenous group in Burma, their territory. So it is very very inspiring, and also it is very important that this kind of indigenous territory needs to be protected and promoted in order to sustain and also protect the food system that the food system around the world. So let me go back to this slide. I like to recite the traditional poem that our ancestors teach us. The poem goes like this: Mother told us to save yam species, and Father told us to save terror species. When we preserve up to 30 kinds, we will not perish when famine comes. So this poem talk about the diversity, biological diversity of the species. We don't only plant or use plant only one type of species in our farm, in our rotational farming or our agricultural land. We use diverse, diversity, because it is very important that to preserve this diversity, because it's the main and the backbone of our well-being and our survival. Yeah, finally, I just want to encourage everyone, in this conference to understand that our indigenous knowledge begin with love, care, and respect and gratitude to the Mother Earth. So it is our shared responsibility to give nature space for regeneration, and most importantly, for our survival and our well-being. And that's what I like to say. And thank you, and W everyone.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Hsar. That was an amazing glimpse of the work that you're doing, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. It was a really rich presentation. There was so much of that. I'd love to dig in deeper, and we'll have some time in the question and answer periods for the audience to engage with Hsar, and please, actually, right now, if you'd like, you have the ability to post your questions and comments, and we'll get to those in a round of more audience presentation following the next presentation. But yeah, there were things in the presentation. I mean, I think, Hsar, maybe in a little further on, we can get to some of the complexities of the political and economic moment. The work of the Karen people is so challenging, in light of all of the kind of marginalization and violation of rights of the Karen people. And we'd love to explore that more and hear about how you've been able to advance your rights in such a difficult context. I think that the slide you showed about governance is really very interesting, very important. It pointed to the amazing sophistication that you've been able to assemble to really ensure that the voices of the communities are prominent, are really what guides the development of this peace park. And I really congratulate you for that. And I think that these issues about governance are completely fundamental to how we have to go about developing the kind of new food systems, or not new food systems, but lifting up the traditional food systems that are so critical for the Korean people, for all peoples around the world. I'm going to introduce our next speaker and also just refer back to something Hsar mentioned. Thank you for your kind comments at the beginning of the session, which is that one of the speakers that was scheduled to speak today, Chris Hanoni from the International Indian Treaty Council, very tragically, sadly, was killed in a car crash just prior to the new year. And so we have today joining us with very broken heart, Janene Yazzie from the organization with which Chris worked, which is the International Indian Treaty Council. And so we're so grateful for Janene for stepping in to the shoes of Chris during this panel. And perhaps Janene can share a few words with us about the tremendous work of her close colleague and friend, Chris Hanoni. I just want to introduce Janene, if I may, with a couple of quick words. Which is Janene Yazzie is a Dene. She's a longtime community organizer and indigenous rights advocate from the Navajo Nation in the North American continent. She's the co-founder and former senior planner of the Little Colorado River Watershed Chapters Association, and she's the co-founder of the Sixth World Solutions. I did a quick search also as we prepared for this session, and Janene wears many, many hats that aren't included in this brief biography, but she's been extremely involved in defending the rights of her people and in networking broadly internationally for Indigenous rights. She has over 12 years of experience working at the community level on restoring traditional land and water management for sustainable food systems. From 2017 to 2021, she worked with the International Indian Treaty Council as their Sustainable Development Coordinator and represented this network, IITC, as co-convener of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group for Sustainable Development. She currently serves as the Southwest Regional Director for NDN Collective. And if I'm not mistaken, Janene, you also were recently participating in a biodiversity convention deliberations. And if there's time, let's talk about that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Janene. Thank you so much again for your words. Please go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. And it's an honor to be here, although under such unfortunate circumstances. And I really thank my fellow presenter, Hsar, for his kind words for our little brother who was tragically and unexpectedly lost over the holiday break. And it's not the ideal situation to come to you all and by any means, but when IITC reached out to me, I knew it was a way to honor the work of our young warrior and young leader, Chris Hanoni, who we all looked at as our little brother. And, Chris is from a community that is very historically and regionally tied to my own peoples. And so a lot of the work that he's done own communities and Danetta as well. And I just, it's a profound loss that we're trying to absorb and adjust to and comprehend, knowing just how critical of a voice he has been as a young leader for a lot of the work that's so meaningful for our peoples and restoring and protecting traditional knowledge systems, bringing to important international conversations and advocacy his expertise as a farmer and as a young traditional knowledge holder himself, the heart and and the beauty of his Hopi culture and his Hopi people, and it's in that respect that I hope to, contribute and fill this void today, where he would have contributed so much, and just bring a bit of our knowledge and our practices in. Trying to figure out where to share my screen for my presentation, because it looks like it didn't go on it. But anyway, I thank you all for inviting me and for working with us as we transition through this difficult time. It's been a lot to try to adjust to in a short amount of time. And so with that said, Yate everyone, my name is Janene Yazzie. I am from the Navajo Nation, which is in the Southwest United States. I have I've been working on with my people on helping to restore traditional lifeways and practices for as long as I can remember. A lot of this is because of the communities I grew up in. Just in my generation alone, I've learned how so much has changed from the ways that we've been able to live off the land and the ways that our people sustained themselves, just in the last few generations because of the impacts of uranium mining in our communities. And so I put together a few visuals to kind of help illuminate where I'm from, so that it could, yeah, okay, there we go, finally. Yeah, so that we could bring a little bit more clarity to kind of our positionality and how that informs our work. But the Navajo Nation is one of the largest contiguous land bases currently held by Indigenous peoples in the United States. We're very fortunate as a tribe to have been able to reclaim and restore land rights to much of our traditional territory, though not all. And the Hopi Nation, if you look at the bottom right picture, is the gray area that's completely surrounded by the Navajo Nation. So as I said, me and Chris's people have been integrated historically and relationally for a very long and rich history. That includes a lot of shared knowledge and exchange of knowledge and foods and seeds when it comes to the ways that our peoples have lived off the land and sustained ourselves for millennia. And so with that said, the natural ecology of our area has really informed the ways that we've developed agriculture. And a lot of people don't know that the Southwest United States is one of the oldest breadbaskets in the world, one of the oldest large landscape scale sites of landscape scale agricultural development prior to colonization. And a lot of our methods were informed, by living in a semi-arid environment, and where the natural ecology is a very delicate one, due to the lack of availability of surface water resources. And so dryland farming has always been an integral part of our food systems. And this is important to note because in the United States, it wasn't until the 2018 Farm Bill revisions and negotiations that a coalition of Native American farmers was finally able to successfully advocate for the recognition of dryland farming as an acceptable and agricultural practice that qualified us for assistance from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so, the beauty of our methods is that it works with our natural season systems. We have a lot of traditional teachings that are informed by certain signal signs, the movement of constellations to tell us when to plant, when to harvest, when to store seeds. And so everything becomes one integrated, holistic way of life in order to sustain our food systems, both in what we grew, but also in the harvesting and the stewarding of our wild foods. And so with that, generations of that practice, you know, many of our peoples have been able to protect and cultivate heirloom seeds that are critical for the continued survival of our food systems. IATC has been, and Chris has been leading a lot of great work in restoring the practices of seed sharing and trading. This is a picture of Hopi white corn on the right, and on the left, this is what Andrea sent me, Andrea Carmen, the executive director of IITC, as an example of that seed exchange and how they were able to grow this corn in Yaqui territory when they have been unable to grow corn that actually produces the ears of the corn. And so this is one of the ways that we have known and are restoring our traditional trade relationships throughout our region that we know have sustained our peoples for generations, and that is going to be more increasingly important for preserving both the biological diversity of our seeds, but also in increasing the resiliency of our food systems in the face of climate change. And so because of like this practice, you know, for many of our peoples in the Southwest, corn is one of our primary sacred foods. It is a staple in our traditional food systems. It is something that is tied to our peoples through language, through culture, through ceremony, and ceremonial practices. And so everything about growing, preserving, harvesting, preparing our traditional foods from corn is deeply tied to who we are and the knowledge systems of our people and the language systems of our people. And so, you know, there's growing appreciation for these the type of corn that our peoples depend upon and continue to grow. This is a picture of just how deep, an example of like a sprout and how deep the root systems grow, because that demonstrates the resiliency of our plants, because they retain that genetic memory and that genetic resiliency from, you know, being cultivated.
Janene, if you're still there, I think you may have frozen. Could you refresh?
I can jump in. This is Daniel Moss from the Agroecology Fund, but let's see if Janene can correct her connection. But it looks like she may have dropped off completely. Okay, let's hope that she can rejoin shortly. Okay, here she is. Janene, we lost you in mid-sentence. I don't know.
Apologies for that. That's one of the technical difficulties of coming to you all from my homelands. Yeah, connectivity sometimes can be very disappointing here. But I believe I left off when I was talking about our root systems and how important they are for the continued resilience of our food systems, and how you know, these foods, like all of this that I've shared so far, like our dryland farming, the type of foods and plants and genetic resiliency that's created, all these things become very important when it comes to our fights for getting legally recognized rights to our water systems and to our traditional land management and stewardship practices. For example, right now, Navajo and Hopi nations are involved in a very long, stressful, and contentious battle to get our water rights recognized. And in the standard for quantifying what rights we have to surface water is based on a criteria called practicably irrigable acreage, PIA. And that assumes that the only places where we can grow food are places where soil is of a certain quality, that's in alignment with the, industrialized agriculture and Western forms of agriculture. But the reality is that we've had and grown our traditional foods all across our landscapes because they have been modified through generations of stewardship and of seed saving and of harvesting and of all of these food practices, to be able to grow across the diversity of clays and soils that we have, because the root systems are resilient, strong, and know how to seek water. And so, in the midst of that, and still fighting for recognized rights for many of these practices, we're also dealing we're on the forefront of the impacts of climate change in the United States, particularly when it comes to drought and the devastation that can have across our landscapes. On the Navajo Nation in particular, on the western portion of the Navajo Nation, we're seeing the spread of sand dunes, and we're doing a lot of our work on watershed restoration, taking landscape because these sand dunes are spreading to such an
Janine,
extent that
so
they're.
sorry to interrupt you. Maybe if you could turn your video off while you're sharing a slide, so just your audio is
Oh,
coming through, just for the moment, because it's skipping a little bit.
yes, thank
Thank
you. That's much better. Um, and and so with the spread of sand dunes and the western portion of our nation, some of these sand dunes are completely taking over home sites, agricultural fields, and communities. And so we anticipate that many of these people are going to have to be located, and many of our interventions where we've tried to reseed and restore the soil moisture and soil health in these areas to build more.
We may
Looks
need
like
you
we
to,
may
yeah,
have
we
lost
may
Janine
need you,
again.
Jean, to refresh. I'm sorry, folks, for the difficulty here. In fact, Janine is not the only person with difficulty. Our speaker from Kenya was also unable to connect. And obviously, as Janine mentioned, this is one of the great challenges of these kind of events. Many of us are used to a very stable connection, and it's not always the case throughout the world, obviously. So let's bear with these technical difficulties for a second and see if we can get Janine back. And we'll continue with the conversation. And again, I just want to encourage folks, if you have any questions or comments, please do put them in the chat or the box available to you to enter those, and we'll continue the conversation in more of a dialogue form once Janine is finished with her presentation. I think I might just, while we're waiting for Janine to join again, just read you the biography of another speaker. Again, my apologies, her apologies for not being able to join due to connectivity problems. But you probably saw in the description of this session that we were to be joined by Milka Chekporir. In fact, she was going to serve as the moderator. And Milka is a young indigenous woman from the Sengwar peoples in the Cherangani Hills in Kenya. And let me just, so we can just, but Janine, I'll just read this through and then we can get back to Janine. And what I wanted to say about Milka is that for the last 6 years, she has been working with her community to address land tenure issues in their ancestral lands for the Mbabut and the Kobalat forests. And due to a lack of recognition of her community land rights, the community has faced human rights violations through evictions by the government of Kenya, all in the name of forest conservation. And we can see a lot of parallels here, if I may, between the experience of Janene and also Hsar in Southeast Asia. Milka has a special interest in gender issues and has been working with women and elders in her community to ensure women are included in the community lands rights struggles. Together with the women in the Mbubut forest, she has helped develop a cultural center where the community hopes to carry out indigenous education classes to educate the youth and children about the Senwar indigenous knowledge systems, most of which have been lost or are diminishing. She's currently completing her master's in gender and development studies at the University of Nairobi with a focus on gender relations in community forest conservation among indigenous people. And Milka currently coordinates the Community Land Action Now. It's called the CLAN Network, a Kenyan movement of communities working to register their lands as community lands under the Community Land Act of 2016. She also coordinates the Defending Territories of Life stream of work at the ICCA consortium. So just to add that there's a rich experience that Milka is bringing forth in her work that we're not able to hear about. She was also as well at the Biodiversity Convention in Montreal recently, advocating on behalf of Indigenous peoples and their critical role in stewarding biodiversity. So with that parenthesis, let me return back to Janene. Janene, let's see how your connection is. Thank you.
Yes, hopefully I figured it out now, but we'll see. I'm going to try to just wrap this up very quickly. Anyway, so on top of the threats from climate change, we can't discount also the ongoing threats and impacts of the extractive industries that exist in and around Navajo and Hopi lands. Coal being one of the ones that impact both of our lands in common. Because of its locality in the Hopi and Navajo borderlands over one of the biggest and purest aquifers that exist for both of our nations. And so, you know, this legacy of extraction is directly tied to the legacy of colonization and the use of indigenous lands, territories, and resources as resource colonies to help support the development of surrounding areas. And so not only do we have coal extraction, but our area, our traditional homelands are also some of the first sites of impacts of the nuclear age and the development and exploration of uranium, the abandonment of uranium mines. And here's a picture that shows that overlap of both, you know, the existence of a uranium mine that is unremediated out in the landscape, being confronted and overcome by sand dunes. And so I use this picture a lot to show, you know, like these intersections between what we're dealing with, because so much of the way policy works, of the way federal and state approaches works, of even the way conservation approaches are working in and around our lands, like to silo these issues and tackle them separately. But we know they're interconnected when we see the impacts of that interconnectedness. And so we have to take into consideration these realities, because we are living with the public health, cultural health, and environmental health impacts that result from it. And so on top of like the abandoned uranium mines, we're also living in areas that are dealing with heavy radiation exposure from both uranium processing, but also the testing of nuclear weapons in and around Nevada and New Mexico. We're also dealing with the prevalence and the expansion of fracking for natural gas in and around the Navajo Nation. Each of those orange dots represents a fracking gas field. And so there are thousands of these across the Navajo Nation in areas that were traditionally sacred sites, agricultural hubs, areas with critical water resources and groundwater systems. And you know, this extractiveness is so extensive that we've been highlighted as having one of the largest methane spots in the world, a methane spot that can be seen from space in the area that is still an agricultural hub for the Navajo Nation in the Four Corners region. And on top of this, we're still dealing with the threats that exist outside our recognized boundaries from upstream contamination because of the way that the water flows through our communities. This is a picture of before and after the Gold King mine spill, which happened in 2015, in which abandoned mine up in the Animas River Valley burst and released hundreds and thousands of toxic materials into one of our main river systems that feeds countless agricultural communities that still exist in the Navajo Nation. And that devastated that food basket for several years as we worked to understand, what kind of contaminants were there and what the threats of exposure was. And this is a great example. This image here was created by one of our own scientists, our Janene hydrologist, Dr. Carletta Chief, who works with the University of Arizona. And this just goes to show what on the left was the state and federal response to that Gold King mine spill, and what their concern was for possible exposure. And they were literally only looking at exposure to tourists and hikers through our territories that have access and use a certain type of water filtration system that's available in like water bottles, like fancy water bottles. And yet when we worked from centering and building off the local expertise and traditional knowledge of the people who live on and within that landscape and depend in many different ways on that surface water system, that sacred river system, they found 23 pathways of exposure from contaminants that exist within the river. And this really goes to show, just like the different levels of relationships and of subsistence and those practices that still exist within our peoples. And so, this wasn't new to us, like this understanding of like the different pathways of exposures and the concerns that we have. Just like Hsar said, our work and what we do is based on our love for Mother Earth, our love for the universe, and our cultural understanding and teachings that all things that live within this consists of and make up an interconnected relationship that in which all things are living, all things are alive, even our sacred elements and our and the soils upon which we depend. And so, this holistic worldview is what we're talking about, and the places that we're coming from when we're working to preserve and protect our traditional knowledge as a foundation for how we build strategies to restore and protect our food systems and our lifeways. And this even requires us in many ways to reevaluate and interrogate some of the words that we've come to use in our modern consciousness of climate change, of ecology, and of agriculture, to bring in our ceremonial knowledge, the wisdom that's found in our language and how we defined and how we've named the landscapes around us in these practices. And so as an example, I decided to share a few words that I'm working with traditional knowledge holders on to better develop outreach and engagement strategies with our people that is more culturally relevant around these issues. And so one of the things that we started with was climate change and how to interpret that in a way that centers our traditional lens and our traditional knowledge systems. And it just goes to show how different we look at and use these terms, because we look at climate as that divine cosmic order that for us is a natural law for how the earth and the universe communicate and live in relationship with one another. And within that order, everything is alive in relationship. And so when we think about climate change, for us, it's that inherent balance in nature that is disturbed due to our unsustainable ways of living and forms of exploitative and extractive development. And so even just reclaiming what those terms mean for us from our perspective goes to show how it changes the way the strategies for protection, for addressing and responding to climate change become radically different. Because for us, it's not just about limiting the emissions of greenhouse gases, but about changing and restoring the ways of living so that we become more in tune with the natural laws, with the natural processes and relationships that exist around us. And so with that, you know, so much of our work, and here's a picture of our little brother, the late Chris Honani, doing this work. With that, that's why it becomes so important for us to work in many different ways, not only restoring our food systems, but also fighting the policies that continue to limit our ability to practice the traditional practices that are important for the restoration of our food systems. Also naming, confronting the legacy of colonization and the way that still plays out, and the delegitimizing the minimalizing of the importance of traditional ecological knowledge and our traditional knowledge systems, and also the existence of white supremacy throughout every institution that we are forced to engage in protection of our rights, because these consist and continue to make up the ongoing threats that we face. And so with our international advocacy, this is from, you know, just this past COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, where Chris Honani actually helped and was very critical in organizing one of the first youth dialogues of young traditional knowledge holders to engage with states and state governments from around the world, discussing how important our traditional life ways are and the importance of protecting them and saving them as a pathway for Indigenous peoples to respond and to address the impacts of climate change. And I'll leave it there. I'll start my video and I'll keep my video on as long as I can, but if I get booted off again, I'll turn it off. And thank you so much for your patience in dealing with my technological difficulties.
No, thank you very much, Janene, for persisting in light of some difficulties there. We really appreciate that. And thank you so much for that remarkable presentation, for again, for your ability to speak in light of the heartbreak that you're feeling and the IITC family is feeling, and of course, Chris's immediate family. So we share the sorrow, and we thank you for sharing the knowledge and the experience of Chris. I could just say a couple of quick things, which is that the last time I saw Chris was at a international gathering of the Agroecology Fund in India. With some regularity, the Agroecology Fund gathers our grantees across the globe, which include the International Indian Treaty Council and the work that Hsar is doing, the colleagues there with the Karen people and the other networks that they belong to. We hold international gatherings for more knowledge exchange and experience sharing and strategy development, so that that the counterparts of the Agroecology Fund can illuminate one another with the kind of work that they're doing, share the kind of experiences that we're hearing today from Janene and Hsar. And this kind of sharing of experiences is obviously really important in terms of shedding light on strategies that people are doing, ways of seed sharing, ways of doing advocacy, that in the end result in stronger local work, but also a stronger global movement for Indigenous rights and agroecological food systems. So we're really grateful to have this kind of sharing here, and we're grateful for the OFRC organizers for facilitating this space where we can bring people together and share this with the broader audience. This kind of work requires such enormous solidarity. Here we are today with Janene and Hsar, and working in their territories, but also knowing that the way to bring forth to fruition this transformation. I really like what you wrote there, Janene, about transition versus transformation. To achieve this transformation, we need tremendous solidarity also from all kinds of other communities, and including the most privileged communities, the white communities in US and Europe, to accompany these struggles. And I think, you know, it raises the question to me, you know, Janene, and when I saw that, about when you wrote that's weak words and just transition, is that we're seeing a lot of hopefully sincere expressions of solidarity with Indigenous peoples as we recognize them as the stewards and caretakers of biodiversity. But at the same time, we know, given the history of colonialization and exploitation, that there's a lot of opportunism there, and a lot of co-optation of terms and maybe not sincere solidarity. So I think that's one of our challenges going forward, is to really, there's obviously tremendous opportunity here as we make this transition towards just and sustainable food systems, to really lift up and legitimately, authentically recognize the role of Indigenous peoples. But there's also the real danger here that we are just, once again, tokenizing and pulling pieces of their practices that are useful for the continuation of the industrial food system without really recognizing their territorial rights and cultures. So let's continue to act in solidarity, so this moment that we're living now can really be an authentic expression of solidarity. So I think, and I really appreciate, Jean, just a quick words about the whole watershed aspect of it, which is obviously critical. Just a quick anecdote, I was looking at the news a few years ago about the city of Des Moines, Iowa, in the Midwest in the United States, that was suing the upstream farmers for contamination. In this case, not so much by mining and uranium, but by over-fertilization and pesticides. And so we're seeing these downstream effects of the effects of industrial agriculture. And I think it's really critical that we look at those, and that we are able to lift up sustainable practices offered by Indigenous food systems and agroecology to really offer a sustainable food system. So with that, we're kind of running low on time. I wanted to turn this back over to Hsar, please, to provide us with any comments that you would like to leave us with, and then turn back to Janene for some final words. And then again, to the audience, we are going to open this up in about 4 minutes, where you can turn on your cameras and enjoy a conversation with Janene and Hsar if you would like to stay on. So Hsar, please put your camera on again, please, and speak if you'd like.
Yeah, again, it is a great opportunity and honor to be part of this conference. And then I'd like to thank everyone for inviting us and also listening to our story. And then the story that we have is quite common, I guess, around the world. And I believe that with strong solidarity among ourselves, with our network, I hope that we can overcome, these challenges and then build a better future, and also able to defend our food system according to the themes of this conference, and also be able to defend our territory. This is our heritage. So let's work together to protect our land, to protect our food system, and then build a better future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hsar. Janene, any other words?
Yeah, I just want to build off both what Hsar is asking for, building that solidarity and that alliance, and also allude to a little bit of what you were sharing. It is critically important to be aware of the ways that extraction comes in many forms. And right now we are seeing the influx of knowledge extraction in our communities, and to pick and choose which parts of our practices they are valuable, are useful for the Western world, and which parts are not. And that becomes extremely dangerous for our people and for our fight. And so a lot of what we're fighting for, it is being challenged by things that seem to sound very good, nature-based solutions. That seems to be in alignment with what we're fighting for as Indigenous peoples. But when you're promoting nature-based solutions without upholding and respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples in its entirety, our rights to develop our own governance systems, to reclaim our lands, to manage in our traditional territories, to restore our language systems, our ceremonial practices, all of these things, then it becomes another form of false solution, because it continues that legacy of colonization. And so, it's not just nature-based solutions, it's also the movement to create rights of nature and to put personhood onto our river systems. These are all from Indigenous peoples who are fighting for the restoration of our traditional ecological knowledge systems. These are well-meaning attempts, but misinformed attempts to restore that natural balance that we need to honor when we talk about sustainable living with our natural world, because they're, again, fitting the sacred into man-made systems that don't even really work for upholding and protecting the rights of humans. And so we want to make sure that we continue to build alliances and partnerships that are informed, that are deeply conscious of these shortcomings and these frameworks, and that you know, keep our eye on the goal and a vision for that's going to work for all peoples and planets. And that's only going to be possible when we support the self-determination and the rights of Indigenous peoples.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Janene. Okay, I think we're going to end up now. And what the next dynamic is that you all can join. We're going to turn off our cameras for a brief period of just 30 seconds or so. And if you in the audience would like to be part of a conversation, please do join us. Again, I'm Daniel Moss from the co-director of the Agroecology Fund. We heard from Janene Yazzie from the International Indian Treaty Council and Hsar from the Karen people. And we were hugely pleased and thankful to you all in the audience for joining us today, and to the OFRC organizers for hosting this platform. Thank you again, and please keep in touch.